Last week, I discussed the career of former second baseman Chase Utley and whether I believe he ought to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. For this video, let's look at another second-year ballot member who was an infielder for a National League East team, David Wright. It's no stretch to say that Wright was one of the most dominant players during his generation, but just how good was he, and does he have what it takes to get elected into Cooperstown? David Wright was a third baseman who played in Major League Baseball for 14 seasons from 2004 to 2018. Unlike most players on the Hall of Fame ballot, Wright spent his entire career with one team, playing exclusively for the New York Mets. In his career, Wright played in nearly 1,600 games and came to the plate nearly 6,900 times. He slashed .296 with a .376 on base and .491 slugging for an .867 OPS and 133 adjusted OPS. He has nearly 1,800 hits, which includes over 650 extra base hits, nearly 1,000 runs scored and runs batted in, stole nearly 200 bases, achieved over 2,900 total bases, reached base nearly 2,600 times, and earned 49.2 WAR. He's a 7-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glove Award winner, and received MVP votes in 6 seasons. Wright was a premier 5-tool player, highlighted by a 2007 season where he joined the 30-30 club while winning a Gold Glove Award at third base. As impressive as that is, how well does he compare to others during his career? Quick side note, from 2017 to 2018, Wright had a combined 3 plate appearances, so when comparing him to the league, I'm excluding those 2 years. Across his career from 2004 to 2016, Wright ranks inside the top 15 in WAR and total bases, top 20 in times on base, extra base hits, RBIs, runs scored, and hits, and top 25 in stolen bases. Among 29 players with at least 6,500 plate appearances during this span, Wright has the 8th highest OPS and 7th highest adjusted OPS. If we look at just third baseman, he's either second or third in all of the mentioned stats, with one exception, where he ranks 4th in RBIs. Among 10 third basemen with at least 5,000 plate appearances here, Wright has the 2nd highest OPS and 2nd highest adjusted OPS. For what it's worth, if we decrease the minimum threshold to 3,000 plate appearances, in which there were 31 third basemen with that amount, Wright drops down to the 4th highest OPS and 4th highest adjusted OPS. I think a lot of those placements speak for themselves, but how good was David Wright if we looked at his prime years? Across a 10-season stretch from 2005 to 2014, he's inside the top 5 in times on base, top 10 in WAR, total bases, RBIs, extra base hits, runs, and hits, and top 16 in stolen bases. Of the exactly 50 players with at least 5,000 plate appearances in this span, Wright has the 9th highest OPS and 7th highest adjusted OPS. For just third baseman, he's either first or second in all of the categories. Here's a full breakdown of that list, where he's first in 3 stats and second in 5. Among 21 third basemen with at least 3,000 plate appearances, Wright has both the 3rd highest OPS and 3rd highest adjusted OPS. Clearly, he's one of the best third basemen during his prime, but as good as he was there, how well does he hold up when compared to other players throughout the history of Major League Baseball? Among all players all time, Wright ranks inside the top 225 in WAR, top 260 in extra base hits, top 350 in RBIs and total bases, top 400 in times on base and stolen bases, and top 425 in runs and hits. Yes, those rankings are not great, but to be fair, it's due to Wright's lack of playing time. More on that later. Moving on, among 497 players with at least 6,800 plate appearances, Wright has the 83rd highest OPS and 85th highest adjusted OPS. For what it's worth again, if we lower the threshold to 5,000 plate appearances, in which there's been 1,053 players with that amount, Wright has the 108th highest OPS and 114th highest adjusted OPS. For third baseman all time, he's in the top 20 in stolen bases, top 30 in WAR and extra base hits, top 40 in total bases, times on base, runs, and RBIs, and top 50 in hits. Just like before, not great rankings, but looking at 118 third basemen with at least 5,000 plate appearances, Wright has the 4th highest OPS and 7th highest adjusted OPS. Very minute detail, but I do want to mention it. One of those 6 players with a higher adjusted OPS, Denny Lyons, spent most of his career playing in the American Association during the 1880s. Extremely long story short, the American Association was a precursor to the modern American League, and to quote Saber, they didn't play at the highest level, and the National League superiority was unsurprising. In layman's terms, technically, yes, Denny Lyons has a higher adjusted OPS than David Wright, but I wouldn't argue if someone said Wright was a better hitter. Anyway, I haven't mentioned anything regarding his defense yet, so for a brief summary, I was a little surprised by this, but Wright's defense was up and down throughout his career, to say the least. He was well known for his excellent fielding ability, and was a human highlight reel at third base, but his advanced stats tell a different story. He has a career D-WAR of 0.3, in spite of the fact he has 5 different seasons where he posted a mark of at least 0.5. How exactly is that possible? It's because he was a streaky player. His 2 best D-WAR marks were 1.5 and 2.1. His 2 worst? Both negative 1.2. I might add that those 2 negative D-WARs came in between the 2 great seasons, so it's not as if his defense steadily declined over time. I looked at other advanced defensive stats as well, like runs from fielding, DRS, and UZR, and found a similar result. Feel free to take it as it is, but in multiple aspects, Wright had elite defense in some years, and other years, not so much. That was a lot said, so to sum up everything mentioned so far, during David Wright's career, most of his counting stats are somewhere inside the top 20, but outside the top 15. Of course, his OPS and adjusted OPS are in the top 10, and his WAR just outside. So it's not far-fetched to say he was a borderline top 10 player in his career. For third baseman, he's second or third in almost every statistic, so I can see an argument for either second best or third best. During his best years, however, David Wright was absolutely a top 10 player in baseball. I would even say he was top 8. For his position, he's first or second almost everywhere you look. Was he the best third baseman during his prime? I'll get back to that later. For players all time, there's no denying his counting stats are underwhelming. Yes, he had a significant lack of playing time towards the end of his career. Again, I'll get to that in a moment. As for his analytical stats, they fare much better. For players with around as many plate appearances, he's in the top 20% for OPS and adjusted OPS. If you think that's good, when compared to players with a significant number of plate appearances, Wright is within the top 10% of all hitters. So, if David Wright was such an incredible player, why did he only receive 6% of the Hall of Fame vote on his first year eligible? I think it's as simple as the low number of counting stats. If Wright were to be elected, pretty much all of his stats would rank near the bottom of the leaderboard among Hall of Famers. His low number of stats is, of course, attributed to his lack of plate appearances. For Hall of Fame consideration, it's on the extreme low side. How low? Out of the 77 Hall of Fame position players to debut since the end of World War II, there are only 2 that have fewer plate appearances than Wright. One of them is Jackie Robinson, who didn't make his National League debut until age 28. The other is Ralph Kiner. Kiner, ironically, was the broadcaster for Wright's Major League debut.
David Wright has really been a high prospect on the list and did almost as well in that level. So David Wright is making his debut here tonight.
The reason why Wright has so few plate appearances is due to a back injury that ended his career prematurely. His last full season came at age 31 in 2014, where he came to the plate 586 times. In his entire career, once he turned 32 years old, he came to the plate 341 times. When a player has that short of a career, it's almost impossible to get elected into the Hall of Fame. I do say almost because we have seen it before. Take the player I mentioned a moment ago, Ralph Kiner. Kiner played only 10 seasons in Major League Baseball because, ironically again, he had a career-ending back injury. Despite the short career, Kiner was just so good in that stretch, it justified a Hall of Fame induction. Does the same ring true for David Wright? Was he that incredible during his prime that he ought to be elected into Cooperstown? Well, As previously mentioned, he has the 7th highest, practically 6th highest adjusted OPS of any third baseman with a significant number of playing time. It is no stretch at all to say that David Wright is the greatest hitting third baseman not in the Hall of Fame. I mentioned earlier how he was a top 8 player in baseball during that 10-year period from 2005 to 2014. Why don't we look further into that? During those 10 seasons, Wright earned 46.4 WAR while achieving an adjusted OPS of 134. Here is a list of every other player that matched those amounts. Albert Pujols, Miguel Cabrera. That's it. Additionally, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that David Wright was the best well-rounded 5-tool player during his prime. Nobody was as good at hitting, running, and fielding in the mid-2000s to mid-2010s. Case in point, there were 32 players in this 10-year span to hit at least 200 home runs. There were 23 with at least 175 stolen bases. David Wright is the only one to achieve both, and he did so with above-average defense. Impressive to say the least, but was he the best third baseman during that time as well? Chipper Jones, Miguel Cabrera, and Alex Rodriguez were better hitters. Adrian Beltre, Evan Longoria, and Scott Rowland were better fielders, and Sean Figgins was a better base stealer. Wright's in this weird middle ground where he simultaneously was one of the best hitters, fielders, and base stealers at his position, but not the best in any area. Again, that goes back to being perhaps the best 5-tool player in baseball for the better part of a decade. Is that enough though? Should David Wright be elected into the Hall of Fame based on everything said? I'm not sure it's enough. I don't think he should be elected into the Hall of Fame. I personally like seeing career milestones hit, and if a player's career is somewhat short, he has to be head and shoulders above his competition. There should be no doubt he was among the best out there. For example, Ralph Kiner led the league in home runs the first 7 years of his career, has the 2nd highest adjusted OPS of any National League player during his career, and was without a doubt the best outfielder in the National League during his time in baseball. I don't believe Wright was that much better than his peers during his peak. It's close, but I stand by my decision. David Wright was one of the greatest players during his career who excelled in every area of baseball. If not for a career-ending injury, he likely would have been a first-ballot inductee, but given the circumstances, I'm going to say he should not be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame.